Nice to see you today. I don't know what the weather is like with you, but it's suddenly turned really grey here. I'm just outside Edinburgh in East Lothian. Um, but I've been reminded of the nice sunshine with all the flowers that I've pressed for today. Some from last year, some leaves over autumn. So you'll be able to see them a little bit on the screen there, showing my table. So today we're going to make floral sun catchers, but you can also use leaves. And we are going to try and do this together. So some people might have brought along the materials, but if you haven't, that's absolutely fine as well. You can just watch along. Um, Feel free just to ask any questions whenever you like. It's a very informal session and it's great to hear from you all. So quite quickly, I'll move over to my table and show you what we're going to do. But I just wanted to just quickly mention sun catchers. So when I think of sun catchers, it reminds me of things like stained glass windows, in different buildings or in houses. And you quite often see, sun catchers made from plastic or glass. So you really can have a go at making these with different types of materials if you want to, but given that we are a therapeutic gardening organisation, we're trying to make use of using lots of nice natural materials from the garden. So you can go out and collect flowers and leaves from your own garden. They don't have to be, super fancy flowers. You can do this with daisies, with buttercups. There's quite a lot of foliage that you can use that makes nice shapes like geranium leaves and some houseplant foliage as well. If you haven't done flower pressing before, you can find lots of information about it online, but there's also, I don't know if you can see this, the Trellis Gardening Activities book. It's a step-by-step guide to year-round gardening activities, has a flower pressing set of instructions within it, so that's quite helpful. So you can do flower pressing in a standard flower press that you could buy, or just by putting flowers within the pages of a magazine or between newspaper pages and pressing them underneath a nice heavy book. If you want to kind of keep the cost down and not have to buy a flower press. You can also press flowers in a microwave, I learned last year. So it's a nice quick way of doing it. Again, if you just Google pressing flowers in a microwave, you can get lots of instructions, but it's super simple. You just get a microwave dish, lay the flowers down on it on top of either a bit of paper towel or a bit of cloth, cover them over with a piece of cloth, put another microwave dish on top so that it's kind of squashing the flowers down. You don't have to press it down, just lay it on top. Microwave it for maybe a minute and a half. Take it out, check them, and the flowers should feel nice and papery and dry. If they don't, you can put them back in and microwave them again with the dish on top for another 20 seconds and see. So if you want to do an activity, say the following day, that can be or that day even, that could be a nice quick way of pressing flowers. And there are absolutely loads of different activities that you can do with press flowers at a tabletop. I always find that they go down really, really well. I think because people find all the shapes, the colours, the textures really quite relaxing and interesting. They can provoke memories for people as well. So moving on to the sun catchers, I'll move over to my table now and I'll just start to take you through the steps of how to make a simple sun catcher from materials that you should hopefully have in your house or in your place of work. So I'm going to mute myself on this screen and move over to my table. Hi everyone, can you hear me okay?
I think it's a bit echoey, Emma. Can you try
Hi.
again?
We just try and sort that. How's that now?
Perfect.
Okay, great. So you'll see I've got laid out in front of me all the materials that we will need for today. So I've got a piece of cardboard just from an old cardboard box. I found that using kind of thinner cardboard works better for this rather than like a big cardboard box that's quite thick, so it can be tricky to cut, and you can sometimes get those nasty cardboard paper cuts that are quite sore. You could also use a cereal box or a paper plate with the center cut out, and this is going to be our frame. I'll show you how to do that in a second. I've also got some baking paper that we're going to use to make the window. And I have a nice sharp pair of scissors for cutting everything, some string to make the hook to hang it with later on. So I'll put that to the side. And I've got some PVA glue. I find when I'm using PVA glue with participants, it's much easier for them to access it if you decant it into a jar or into a little glue pot. But sometimes the small plastic glue pots you get kind of fall over. So I sometimes have lots of jars full of PVA glue, and they're quite handy just to sort of spread around the table. A couple of different paintbrushes of varying sizes for spreading the glue. And I've got a little Tupperware with soapy water and a cloth and a tea towel, just because some people don't like the feeling of the PVA glue on their fingers. Other people absolutely love it. But it's nice to be able to, for people to be able to wash their hands when they want to. I've also got a stapler that we may or may not use for attaching the string at the end. So the first thing you want to do is to make your frame. So you might already have cut out a frame with a bit of cardboard, or you might have made a frame from a paper plate. The frame can be any size. I've found not making them too small works better because it gives people more space to spread the flowers out, and it gives them it's less fiddly. So this is about A4 size, this piece of cardboard. And I am just going to make it into a frame by cutting out another rectangle in the middle. So you could have these frames kind of firing paintbrushes across the room. You could have these frames pre-prepared, or if you're working with people who are able to use scissors, they could make them themselves. So I've just poked a hole in the cardboard with a pencil, and I'm now just cutting into it. So I would try and make the edge of the frame at least a couple of centimeters wide, because it gives you a bit more space to stick the baking paper on with. If you make the frame at the edge too thin, then you'll find that it's a bit more flimsy. So having a chunkier frame gives it a bit more structure and kind of holds it together a little bit better once you have made it and you want to hang it in the window. So just about cut out the cardboard. I've seen people make these in nice shapes, so you could do a heart-shaped frame or a flower-shaped frame if you're so inclined. People you're working with might enjoy choosing their own shape, whether they want to do a circle or a rectangle. So here is my frame. Super simple, didn't cost a thing. Obviously I've got the kind of pattern on the back that was from the box. So I'm going to try and have mine so that it's the plain side. You can also paint the frames if you want to, or let people decorate the frames with pens if you want to extend this activity a little bit. So I've got my frame. Just going to move things out of the way a little. And now I want to make the window. So I'm going to lay the baking paper out and put the frame on top. Like that, so that I can try and make sure that I cut a piece of paper that is the same size or slightly smaller than the frame. So I've just got a pencil here and I'm just going to draw around on the paper. This bit doesn't need to be super neat because you're going to be gluing it onto the frame anyway and you won't really see the edge of the paper. But the most important thing is that you've got enough to fit on every edge of the frame. And you want to cut out 2 pieces of the baking paper of the exact same size. So I'm just going to cut that out. Again, you could have these bits of paper ready in advance if you wanted to, or you could have them, you know, with the line sketched out and let people sit and cut out the shapes themselves. So that is my first piece of paper. And I'm just going to do the same thing again. I'm just going to lay it on top, draw it around. Like that. If you've got baking paper like me that's quite crumpled, which I don't really mind, I think it kind of adds a nice texture to the Suncatchers, but you can iron. I've heard of people ironing the baking paper before if they want to have it nice and flat. I don't think it really causes any issues with it being slightly crumpled, but it depends what kind of an effect you're going for. So I now have a frame and 2 pieces of paper to make the window. So I'm going to get my glue over and quite a nice sort of chunky brush. You can see what size that is. So it's not like a really fiddly brush, but it's also not a huge paintbrush. Just picks up a bit more glue. And I am going to paint around the edge of the frame. So it doesn't need to be super thick here. You can water down your PVA slightly if you want to make it go a little bit further. So I put a couple of drops of water in this, but just standard PVA glue is fine. So I'm just spreading the glue all the way around. Until I've covered most of the frame. And then I'm going to get my first square of paper and just lay it on top. Some people might need a hand with this bit, just trying to line the paper up with the frame. If it goes over the edges of the frame slightly, don't worry, because you can always trim it at the end. But you just want to make sure that people have the whole frame covered with no gaps in the middle. And then you can kind of smooth it out like this, so that people have got a nice flat surface to work on. There we are. And then I find it easier if I just, at this point, just turn it over so the glued side is underneath. And this is where I'm going to start putting my flowers on. So this is where you can really get creative. You can add individual flowers. So, you know, I'm already going to use my hand washing. You don't really want to have super gluey fingers when you're dealing with the flowers because it can kind of make it tricky to get them off your hands. And you want to have quite dry hands as well so your flowers don't disintegrate. But this is a little primrose and an individual flower head. So you can use flowers like that. You can also, when you're pressing your flowers, choose to keep the stalks on. This works quite well for the more delicate flowers. I did what was I going to show you? A little poached eggplant I tried doing this one with its foliage, with its stems, sorry, still attached. I think it looks really lovely, being able to see the leaves like that. But you could also do a poached eggplant, just the individual flower, and it comes out something like this. So it's always a nice surprise to see what the flowers come out like. And I'll just show you a couple of pieces of foliage. So leaves, if they're quite thin, can be really nice to do, and you can make quite a nice autumn activity. And you can choose then to make your sun catcher either as a sort of seasonal display. You could do a spring one for the summer, autumn, or it can be something that looks like a landscape, so with flowers growing out the bottom. People sometimes use flowers as a sunshine. Other people like making patterns, you know, like a mandala with sort of symmetrical patterns all the way out. So you can just start to pick up individual flowers and glue them on. So I keep all my pressed flowers just in this Tupperware box that's got sections, and I've still got some that I pressed last summer, and they're still in really good condition. So it's something that's quite a nice activity just to keep doing if you've got a group, just to keep on pressing the flowers, emptying the presses into storage, and then pressing again. And then you can save all the flowers and leaves up for doing on a as a sort of wet weather activity. So when it comes to attaching the flowers, I'm going to be thinking about which way my sun catcher is going to be displayed. So do you want it to be seen from inside the house? Do you want it more to be seen as something outside? If you've got plain cardboard, you don't need to worry about which way around it is. So you just want to get each individual flower and then get a more of a thin sort of dainty paintbrush, dip it in the glue, have a think about where you want to press, and then just start to glue your paper. Again, you don't have to be very exact with the glue. If there's glue left around the edges of the flower, it doesn't matter, it will dry. And then you just start to place the flowers. When you're doing that, I sometimes find that getting the dry end of the paintbrush can help to sort of press them down. And again, if they're not sticking perfectly, we're going to be covering this over with another layer of paper to hold it all together. So you just want to give them a bit of hold with the initial bit of glue. So I think I'm going to go for one at the bottom here that looks like it's kind of growing out the bottom. And again, just going to glue down. I have tried doing this by covering the whole sheet in glue to begin with, but I find that people then just find that they get really, really gluey. So just choosing individual spots to glue down just makes it a little bit less messy. I don't know if you're managing to see this, so I'm just gluing them on like that. So it might be easier to see that way actually. So I'll just carry on. So I think I'm going to go for trying to do some different colours across mine. So what else do I have? I pressed these hellebores earlier in spring. I used some of them. Is anyone making a sun catcher at the moment, or are people watching for today?
I think it looks like everybody's watching. If you're doing along with us, raise a hand so we can see. Yeah, I think everybody's just watching, Emma.
Watching, that's fine. And has anyone had a go at pressing flowers before, or is this going to be something completely new for people? Everyone's still muted?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just choosing some different flowers from my box. And these were some from different flower arrangements I had at a garden I was working at. So just as they were about to, they were in this sort of summer pots, just as they were about to go over, I'd kind of go in, just grab a few flowers and shove them in my press. So for some of these with the chunkier center part of the flower, it can actually work quite well just to pick up the flower and glue it on its back. This is a little daffy, which worked quite well. I'm going to add that again at the bottom. And the flowers and leaves can overlap. You will find that the more they overlap, the less the light will get through them. But if there's little bits of overlap, it can sometimes look quite nice. Daffy there. And what else do I have? Lots of autumn leaves and some other little pressed ones with foliage here that I can add on. I'm just gluing, gluing, gluing. So I've done this activity now quite a few times with children, with adults, and I just find that something about sitting, making a picture with flowers, people just seem to be really calm when they're doing it. I think because there's quite a lot of room for people to get creative and make their own designs. That's a little origeron from last year. So there's no rules, you know, people can make this look however they like. If you want to put some on and they go over the edge of the frame like that, you can just snip them off at the bottom if there's parts of the foliage that you don't want. So I'll just put that away. And then you can kind of shuffle your flowers down in the glue. So I think I'll just put maybe a couple more across the top. It's starting to look quite colourful already. It gives quite a quick sort of impact. I've got some of these nice little, these were ones I collected when I was out and about, little yeah, sort of seaside flowers, pink, sea pinks, I think they're called, from near where I live. I try, you know, if I'm collecting little flowers from where out and about, I would just make sure I wasn't taking very many and leaving most of them for other people to enjoy or for the bees and other insects. But it's nice to have a few as a memory of different walks or different places you've visited. Obviously wouldn't be taking any from anybody else's garden or a botanics or anything like that. Don't want to be getting anyone into trouble. So I think I'm just going to fill a few more gaps at the top. Be over here. And I'll maybe add one more over. Fuchsias work really well because they've got these lovely long anthers and stamens. I'm trying to remember my plant biology here. So they work really well, especially the really brightly coloured ones. When you're choosing flowers to press, you want to go for ones that aren't too chunky. So I wouldn't be pressing something like a whole rose. You'll end up with kind of mold inside your press. Things like cosmos, daisies, the poached eggplant works really well. Poppies can work quite well. Smaller daffodils. If you do want to press bigger flowers, you can choose individual petals to press. So I think that's maybe enough for this one. You can I could keep adding and adding because it's just such a nice activity to do. So once I've got to this point, I then want to cover this over with the other layer of paper. So again, I'm going to go back to using my larger brush. And I'm just going to go around the frame first of all. Move my flowers out the way. all the way around the frame. And if some of the glue goes into the window, that's not a bad thing because we're going to be putting some glue in the window as well. So
I've
that's,
got a question in the chat here. Could I ask you that just now?
of course,
Whilst you're doing that. So
go ahead.
Melissa's asking, saying that when she pressed flowers in the past, they have lost their colour. Are
Mhm.
there particular flowers which are good at keeping their colour?
So I think ones that have a brighter color to begin with. So you'll see here, some of these were from different pots of flowers at a garden that I work at. And ones like echinaceas, daisies, cosmos work really well. If you get brightly coloured hellebores, I think if you want ones for foliage, things that have quite dainty foliage, things like erigeron, as I said, the fuchsia worked really well. Poppies have got such papery leaves, petals, sorry, that if you go for a really light poppy, it does tend to just go translucent. But if you pick like a brightly coloured, like a red poppy, you can sometimes get quite amazing presses, although they are quite delicate to handle. So depends on the people you're working with, are they going to be able to handle the more dainty flowers? So I'm just having a look at my box here to see if there's anything else that works really well. Oh, these were good actually. Acer leaves, so if you can see that, they worked really, really well. So there's an acer in a garden I work in that's covered in amazing leaves at the moment, and they pressed really well and kept their colour. Let's see what else we've got. Sometimes I think just the shapes are nice. So that is a geranium or a pelargonium, like the ones you'd have as a house plant that you can put outside over summer. And the shape of the leaf worked really well. And it still has its quite sort of strong geranium smell. Having a look for any others. I've got a cosmos here. So I think this is an example maybe of one that I still like them though. This was more pinky and it stayed pinky, but not as pink as it was, this cosmos. So some of them do dull down a little bit, but yellows I find tend to keep their colour a little bit better. I also tried out lavender actually, and that worked really nicely. I don't know how well you'll be able to see that. Pressed lavender was nice, and it also has still got the scent of lavender, which is like an extra little benefit. When you're going through the flowers with people, it can be helpful to ask them about, you know, their memories of flowers in their own gardens and their family's gardens. Ask them to think about what colours they like, what do the flowers feel like. You're trying to kind of help people connect to the sensory benefits of working with flowers and leaves. So this is a kind of activity that you don't need to rush if you've got the time to do it with people. It can be quite a nice activity to chat through, you know, did somebody's granny grow roses and what can they remember about that? Why have they chosen certain flowers or leaves? What kind of patterns are they making? Just trying to stimulate conversation, make this a nice social activity as well. So I'm just now trying to make sure I've got enough glue around the Suncatcher. So I'm trying to avoid brushing over the top of the flowers unless, like this hellebore, they're quite sturdy, because you might brush the flowers off. Instead, I'm trying to kind of go for the spaces between the flowers and just make sure there's glue dotted around. So it's quite, I don't know if you'll, it's quite gluey now, you might not see that, but quite wet. So I'm now getting my second sheet of paper, and this one you want to try and get it in the right spot as you go down towards your Suncatcher, because if you have to kind of shuffle it around too much, you might move your flowers. And then again, once it's down, you just want to smooth it all out. So that the glue is managing to stick to both sheets of paper and to the edges of the frame. And then at that point, ideally, if you can, you want to give it a little bit of time to dry before you start trying to attach your hook. So once this goes up in the window, you'll start to see how nice it looks. But I'll just show you one that I made earlier so you get an idea of how to attach the hook. So this is one that I did a month ago or so. So the flowers, once they're in the sunlight, some of them can lose their colour, but it still kept the colour and the shapes quite well. And so to hang it up, you want to just attach any kind of piece of string, wool, twine, anything that you have. And you can attach that to the back of your frame. Either, so I've stapled this on, but you can use sellotape. I don't find that using the glue works very well. It just comes away. I think the staples are quite a nice sturdy way. So I just lay the string over the frame and then staple it like that. And that attaches the string on both sides. And I'm just going to show you how this looks with some light shining through it. So I do this. So you can kind of start to imagine with the sun coming through a window. That's the one I did last time. And this one is still feeling a wee bit flimsy because it's very gluey, but you can start to see how it might look. I'm going to put that one down so it dries. And so then you just need to choose where you want to hang it. So if you've done this as a group, people might want to take them home and hang them up at home. Or you might want to create a display in the window of the place where you work at the front door to brighten things up, or in the arts and crafts room, or if you're, you know, in a care home or hospital, people might want to hang these up in their own window to give them something nice, you know, nature related to look at. And you can just repeat this anytime throughout the seasons to create different types of displays. You can do them with just autumn leaves. That works really well. So I think that is me, and I'll come back over now to my other screen, Lorna.
Okay. Great. Perfect. Does anybody have any questions that they would like to ask Emma? Just either put them in the chat, raise your hand, or just unmute and start asking your question.
No questions? That's okay. I'd love to see how people get on with these. So if you do have a go, please feel free to send us in some emails to the email that you got the link from. It's really, really nice for us to see how people get on. Or if you have any new ideas for things to do with pressed flowers or sun catchers, you can let us know. Oh, I think we have got a question there. Not heard of putting flowers in the microwave. How does this work? So it just dehydrates them at a much quicker rate than pressing them. So when you press flowers between sheets of paper, they're sort of drying out over, I'd usually put them ideally in a press for a couple of weeks. But when you do them in the microwave, you're just doing the same thing, but much quicker. So if you want to do an activity and you haven't had time to press flowers in advance, you can do them in the microwave that way. I don't know if you were here, Lorna, when I was explaining at the beginning how to do it. Yeah. Right.
Sorry, it was just such a novel thing. I'd not heard of that.
Yeah, well, I'm the same as you. I went to it was like a community group session last year, and we were using pressed flowers to, you can attach them to the outside of a candle, which is a really nice activity to do as well. If you use a warm spoon and put the flower on the outside of the candle and then wrap it in baking paper, you can slightly melt the wax and the flowers stick on. But anyway, I'd arrived with lots of pressed flowers, and one of the other participants just went off to the microwave and came back with all these hydrangea flowers are amazing, actually. That I should have mentioned that. They're a really, really good one to press. And obviously just one head of flowers, you can have 100 little tiny flowers. So off she went with the hydrangea head. She snipped off all the individual flowers, put them in a dish, covered it over, put another dish on top, came back and had all these pressed flowers ready. I was quite impressed. So it was a new one for me too, but once I had a Google, it seems that there's loads of folk explaining how to do it.
It's just quite quick because
Yeah,
members can go outside wherever they are, literally do the whole hands-on tactile of picking the flowers
yeah,
appropriately in
yeah,
appropriate locations, then bringing them in, and then it's immediate, isn't it?
yeah.
It's very clever.
Yeah, it's a nice way to do it if you don't have time for them to sit in the press for a few weeks. Yeah, yeah,
Thank you.
that's all right.
Hi, Laura. Sorry, Emma.
Hi there.
It's John Downs' name, but it's actually Lauren and Black Holland District Volunteer Group,
Hi there.
and there's 5 of us here from the group. So I just want to say thank you very much for demonstrating this today. We have played a bit with dried flowers, and we are going to be playing a bit more. So you've given us some helpful tips today. Thanks very much.
You're welcome. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Yeah, I love doing things with pressed flowers. I think they've got endless opportunities for things you can make with them.
Yeah, so I've previously made bookmarks and things like that. So Suncatchers are on the list.
Good. Great. Well,
Thanks
hope it
very
goes well.
Any more questions for Emma? I think that might be all of our questions. Emma, is there anything else that you would like to add before we finish up, Emma?
Oh, I think we're good. I think, as I say, it'd be lovely to see how people get on with the activity. And I hope you'll enjoy getting outside and looking for nice flowers to press as well, because that is part of the enjoyment, is the getting outside and looking around for flowers.